wanted to do a follow-up video to our original soil blocking video where I used the 4 blocker, and I have to knock out a whole bunch of soil blocks today, and I thought that would be a good opportunity to use my stand-up 12 blocker and give a quick tutorial on how we make these on the farm. So 4 simple ingredients that we use in our soil blocks. We've tried lots of different formulations, and this is the one that we like the most for blocks that we're going to make into larger size blocks, so the 2-inch block, and that we're going to be directly planting into the field after that. So for ratios, this is about 2 5-gallon buckets of nicely sifted sandy loam soil. This is about 3 gallons of nicely screened, finely screened peat, so there are no like chunks or sticks or anything in it. And then this is about 2 gallons of fine grade perlite. In addition to those 3 things, we also add about 2 cups of an all-purpose organic fertilizer into the mix. And so we're going to put those all together and get it blended before we wet it down. So for smaller batches of soil blocks, I might take this formula and just mix it on the table or in a bin. But on days that we have to make a lot of soil blocks, we get out the concrete mixer. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of pour all the ingredients in. I'm going to layer them in, turn it on, let it mix them all dry, and then add some water and mix them to the point where I'm ready to make soil blocks out of them. So the proportions that I talked about, what we found is that in our particular cement mixer, that makes about 400 blocks, and it's about the biggest batch that we can get in there. So we layer everything in, and then I'm going to turn it on, get it all nice and mixed up. So I'm just going to continue adding water until I feel like the consistency is right. It's going to take a lot more water than you might think, but especially with the mixer, you want to let it kind of roll through and make sure that all that moisture is getting all the way to the back of the barrel. All right, the soil came out of the mixer. I went ahead and patted it into a firm kind of little plateau of soil. It's just a little bit deeper than you can see that the soil cell block is going to be. That way when you take the blocker and you thrust it into the soil, it's going to fill each of those blocks evenly. It's going to fully charge the blocker and make for a more consistent block throughout your trays. So now that I have my flat plateau of soil, I'm going to take the blocker and I'm going to push it down directly, straight perpendicular to my soil. And then I'm going to kind of rock it back and forth, forward and backward, and then side to side. And I'll start to see the mud come up through the soil block and onto the top of the blocker. And I know that at that point I'm looking at all 12 of the blocks and I can see it coming through, which means I have soil charged all the way into those blocks. So I kind of shimmy it around, lift it up, bring it to my tray, and then just a single, and then there you go. So I'll keep filling this tray, and this tray will hold about 63 soil blocks. So I had a hard time getting started with this 12 blocker because I was having a hard time getting all the cells to fill evenly and to fully compress so that I was getting nice solid 12 soil blocks at a time instead of getting like 8. So a couple of things that I found to do, one was to make that nice firm surface in which to put the blocker to make sure that all the cells are full. And then inevitably some of the cells just aren't going to fill. So what I like to do first is I like to set up a full charge 12 block just off to the side so that when I come up with empty blocks, I can take one and just stick it in. So the most common places that I lose blocks are on the corners, and I'll show you a little trick that I use when I'm actually blocking in order to hopefully mediate that problem and not have it be an issue. But in the meantime, making some extra blocks so that if you have an empty charge or you have one that maybe didn't fill up all the way or one that's just ugly and you feel like, ooh, I could do better than that. Also, my soil trays only hold a certain number, so sometimes I have to fill in with an odd number of leftover blocks. So having those extra ones on hand is really handy. So what I found is that a lot of times the corners are the ones that aren't going to get full. So once I press my blocker in with that tamp down, I'll swing it around and kind of find another spot that has nice tall soil and firm the blocker, the corners in. And then do that wiggle back and forth and front and back. Another couple of things that are really nice to have when you're doing soil blocks: gloves. Even though it's perfectly reasonable to do them without them, I find especially with the peat, I get little tiny splinters if I don't. And then also, every once in a while, it's a great idea to have a bucket that you can just wash your blocker off. It helps to get all that grit that might get caught up into the mechanism free, so that you don't have issues when you're trying to get a full charge out of there. All told, today we made about 2,600 2-inch soil blocks. So that was made possible by that 12 block stand-up blocker. It just allows us to be a lot more efficient with our time and filling blocks so that we can get big projects like this done in a day instead of 2 or 3. Anyway, thanks for swinging by the farm. We'll see you next time.